I just want to first let you guys know that it's more my privilege to be able to spend time with you. It's not special for you. It's special for me. It's I think something that I hope each of you has learned in your undergraduate education and are learning in your graduate and medical education, that you become a lifelong learner, you become a lifelong fan of science and medicine and humanity. And I think a big part of that is always making yourself available for others. And I know I derive a phenomenal pleasure, and I'm really been looking forward to this. So you can shoot your questions. I will just say, though, as a list of questions, uh, it's a fantastic list, very well thought out, and I really appreciate getting a list in advance so I could give some thought. What's the burning question?
Well, I'm sure a lot of the questions probably allude to kind of how you came to your specific point in your career, because it is somewhat of a unique path, especially for a lot of the conversations that we have with this program. So I'd just love to hear kind of what brought you there and what were the steps along the way.
Okay. Uh, all your questions are good, but I really like that question, and I think it's a great one to kick off the conversation here. I'm a person who really learned at a relatively young age. I followed my own instincts. If it felt right, if it excited me, if I was enthusiastic, then that was the right path to take. But I think to your point, uh, my educational as well as my career journey is by no means uh, traditional. And I guess I want to say I never was one who was intentionally trying to, let's say, buck the trends. What I would say is that an entrepreneurial spirit ran very deep in me. And because of that, and when I went to medical school at Northwestern, there was not a lot of talk of entrepreneurialism. Biotech hadn't been born. There was definitely, I can promise you, no encouragement to deviate from the path. But for me, it was having some real deep curiosities and deciding that I was going to follow my instincts and I was going to pursue what I wanted to pursue and work it into my medical training and career. And I did the same thing during residency. I did the same thing during fellowship, and I've done the same thing through my academic and now industry career. I follow my instincts. And the only other way I'll answer that is one of my greatest mentors, from who was my first really great mentor at Washington University in St. Louis when I did my residency at Barnes Hospital, who we're still friends now, 30 some odd years later. And he always reminds me that I was the person who didn't do what I was, say, urged to do. And he admits that people were urging me to do what was best for them, not necessarily best for me. And he always admits that I've ended up in my career exactly where I said I wanted to go and be 30 some odd years ago. So I guess I would just encourage you too to follow your instincts. And if you have a deep desire to study something, learn something, go make it happen. If you have any specific questions about it, go ahead and ask. I don't want to bore you with every detail, but each of you has, do your path.
A bit of a follow-up, maybe, if that's all right.
Sure.
I was wondering if you might be willing to talk a little bit about your transition to, industry and to biotech in general, and I guess multi-pronged question in the sense of what drew you to that, how the transition was, and sort of how you balance working in private practice and, either compare and contrast maybe with clinical practice.
Okay. Because I was in what was called the honors program in medical education at Northwestern, I graduated from medical school, a couple of years younger than the, most graduates. And that always made me, somewhat younger. Uh, I trained in, after medical school, internal medicine, internship and residency. I did fellowships in hematology, a separate one in medical oncology, and then I did a protein chemistry postdoctoral training before I took my first faculty position. I was 30 when I took my first faculty position, and I became vice chairman of the Department of Medicine by the time I was 32. I then moved on to my last academic post, which was at the Cleveland Clinic, and I was a department chairman there. And I have to admit, when I was 39, I had kind of achieved a lot. I was very happy. And it was a day that one of the people that was in my department, I looked up, I was writing a book chapter, and I saw him standing in the doorway of my office. And he was shaking his head. And he said, "You're so lucky." He said, "You could just keep doing what you're doing right now for the next 25 years and never have to change what you're doing." And it was frightening to me. It was like lightning hit me because I don't deal well with being bored. And that just made me realize that the last thing I wanted to do in my career was plateau. So I started working on a compound that I had helped invent that was being developed in a company in California. I worked with them for a couple of years from my academic position. I still was guiding their development. And ultimately, one night, the CEO of that company called me and said, "What's it going to take to get you to move from Cleveland to San Francisco?" And, a few months later, arrived in San Francisco. So, but I was really following something that I had worked quite deeply on, sort of discovering and inventing and developing to see it through. It ultimately failed in phase 3 development, but again, it wasn't like I just jumped on an airplane and moved to California with no job and no direction. I've never done private practice, and just to make sure there's no confusion, when I left full-time academics, I left behind my clinical work, I pretty much left behind my teaching work, and I dove in full-time with my industry work. There are people who come into industry who might still see patients 1/2 day a week at a local hospital or teach at a local medical school. I was asked to do that, and I personally decided that I was sort of, to use a no limit hold'em poker term, I went all in on industry, and I didn't want to sort of uh, do anything that might distract me and contribute to failure.
Thank you.
You'll be happy to know there's a couple of HPMEs in the crowd tonight. Where are the HPMEs?
Where are HPMEs? I like to see them. Yay, see?
Unfortunately, it's no longer.
That's what I hear. So what year are you?
I just started my M1 year, but I graduated undergrad in 2018, so I took 2 years off.
Okay. Well, I felt very fortunate way back when to have been accepted to that. I only applied to one accelerated program when I was in high school. I really wanted to go to the Northwestern one, and it's never been something that I've regretted. So I hope you don't have regrets either.
Absolutely, it's been a great opportunity.
Amazing.
Well, while people are thinking about questions they want to ask, I just want to say that on the list I got, question number 1, I thought was something that might catalyze some discussion. And someone, or maybe more than one person, asked the question of what were some of my favorite memories of being a Northwestern undergraduate and an HPME in particular, and during the medical school part. And that was really a great first question because it made me reminisce. And I would say that the things that probably stand out as the fondest memories are, I remember when I figured out what I liked. And some people go through medical school either thinking they know what they want to do and almost waiting to see whether something else usurps that field. For me, it was more of a process of elimination. You know, I knew, for example, the first night when at 3 a.m. I was awakened to have to run in and participate in a C-section and deliver a baby. I knew that moment that I was not going to be an obstetrician. So, you know, I was able to scratch that off the list. And, you know, if you scratch enough things off the list, you're left with a very short list. But I remember when I really figured out what just got my pulse going, got my mind going, got questions percolating through my mind. And that was anything that I was learning about blood vessels, and cancer. And that's when I actually took comfort in almost feeling like I know what my path is. Another thing that I have memories of were when I went to medical school, HIV as a term did not exist. This was in the earliest days of the AIDS epidemic when it was still referred to as GRID. I was in medical school when the HTLV-3 virus was identified. And I just say, I, in retrospect, feel very fortunate to have gone to medical school during a period where there was a lot of mystery about a lot of patients. There was just a lot of unknowns, and it kind of made it exciting to take care of patients. You didn't know what the course of their disease was going to be, and new tests were coming out. And I guess I found that sort of fascinating. I definitely enjoyed the research I did, and I definitely enjoyed when I had some really good mentors, people that recognized my strengths and were able to coach me and encourage me. And I'd have to say that probably without that, I might not have taken as aggressive a course in my career. So I'm very thankful to those things and just have tons of great memories.
So I initially was going to ask something about, like what does it take to like start a biotechnology company, right? And like, did you have the IP beforehand, or were these like ideas companies? But now I'm a little more curious. When you talk about like listening to your instincts, do you have like specific, like concrete examples of like moments when you like realized something, like the lightning bolts hitting you when the man was standing in your office or something, of like those little like turning points that brought you to where you are now?
Sure, and there were lots of them. Boy, so when I was a medical student, I was able to get funding and actually set up a lab and do research for several years in Chicago. And one of the things that I was really kind of interested in is my mother had just died of breast cancer. And I was obviously, that was upsetting. I had a real fascination in the early days of bone marrow transplantation. And one of the things that I did and ended up writing when I was in medical school was the first ever patient series of using bone marrow transplantation to treat women with breast cancer. But again, it was like, here's an idea, here's taking two things that are greatly influencing me in my life. How do I merge them to generate a question and a hypothesis? And then how do I find great people who can facilitate my generating data to try to address that problem? So that's one sort of epiphany. I would say that, trying to think of them, there were actually been so many. Very recently, just within the past year. And I can't tell it to you though, because it's not yet patented. But again, still at my current age, I still sit here and I'll have this like, hey, wait a minute. So one of the things I'm doing with my newest company is I'm drawing upon experiences I had when I was a kid. And my father was an executive in the defense industry. And that helped me actually get a job one summer where I worked for the Department of Defense as a security guard with a security clearance of secret. And I worked the midnight, the graveyard shift, guarding a missile manufacturing plant. So I kind of got very interested in and learned a lot about radar and defensive missiles. And I've actually drawn from that to design something we're going to be making, as a cell therapy product that pretty much mimics what a radar and missile battery does to protect against invading airplanes and missiles. So again, I guess I just say I draw upon all of my past experiences to inspire me and come up with new ideas and then execute upon them. So I hope that helps. I mean, I can go through more, but
That was great.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Do you find that it sounds like you had an academic interest in hematology, oncology, even outside of an interest in pursuing biotechnology and industry? But do you find that specialty has actually lended itself well? I guess that's kind of something I've heard, is that there's a lot of, a lot of funding and research dollars going into that space right now. So I'm curious what your thoughts are.
So I just was phenomenally curious and passionate about things related to bleeding and blood clotting. And when I was an intern, the head of cardiology where I was training happened to have been the lead developing physician on blood clot dissolving drugs that were being approved to treat people with acute myocardial infarction. Drugs like TPA, if you've had any exposure to that. And I was just fascinated and actually wrote my first grant when I was an intern and got funded and set up a lab and actually developed a diagnostic test that I was able to get approved when I was a resident. So I kind of made my first product. I got strongly recruited, and we'll just say a little bit of arm twisted, that I should stay and be a cardiology fellow. And I said, yep, I want to train in classical hematology. And there became this whole argument of, well, hematologists were the blood clotting experts of the past, but the cardiologists were going to be the blood clotting experts of the future. And I let's just say either I didn't listen or I didn't agree. So I pursued the training that I wanted to pursue. I did oncology training as well. And again, it's very much following my passion. I don't believe in having regrets. I'm fortunate that both of those areas have been fruitful from the industry side. But, that was like one of the questions that someone asked, was they asked me to comment on, sort of look in my crystal ball and comment on future areas of medicine that I thought would be really exciting and fruitful in the future in biotech. And, I don't know who asked that question, raise your hand maybe, or say me. Well, the ones that I highlighted is in addition to things like oncology, which is a lot of interest, but the neurosciences are tremendously active right now. Vaccines, gee, wonder why. Pain, with the opioid crisis, if we can find better ways to control people's pain without addicting them, wouldn't that be a wonderful advancement? And then this kind of ties to the neurosciences, but age-related diseases. There's a lot of this, improve people's symptoms, make people have a better quality of life, but also how do we improve their longevity? And these are areas that a lot of money is being poured into, and there's a lot of opportunity for really, curious and exciting and sort of interested people. Someone throw me a question.
I've got one. So I know you're not really involved in clinical duties these days, but I'm curious, maybe when you made this jump to biotech, what aspects of your clinical training, whether that's like the actual, like maybe your knowledge as a clinician or something else that you learned along the way, did you find that you called on the most during your path to today? And maybe if you could comment on what you anticipate you'll be taking from your training with some of your future ventures as well.
Sure. I really like that question, and I'm gonna tie it in with a few other things. I know there were people in my class. I remember, one classmate graduated from medical school and, announced that day she's going off to law school. Great. That's her passion. That's wonderful. My belief was what I wanted to do when I was in medical school is I wanted to be in academics. I wanted to become the dean of a medical school. I became an associate dean when I was 32, 33 years old, and I loved that. I was the associate dean for education at a medical school. Loved that. Things changed in some of how finances of medical schools and reimbursement and who controls money. But I kind of lost that interest and became much more excited about how can I invent new therapies? How can I identify patients in my own practice that I have almost nothing I can give them? Well, instead of belly aching or calling people at companies and saying, you need to do something, I said, well, I need to do something. Okay? I made it my obligation, my responsibility, not everyone else's. But along those lines, there are many physicians in the biotech industry who have the MD degree. Some of them, they graduated from medical school. That's it. Some maybe did a year of internship. Some completed residency. Some did residency and some fellowships. And some, like me, were full-time faculty and academicians, both teaching, doing research, and seeing patients. And I did that for over a decade. I've never, ever, ever, ever regretted my education, my training, and practicing. It means that now that I'm on this side, I actually have a much better, certainly, connection with leading physicians, but I have a much better appreciation, I believe, of what patients need, what physicians want, what will work within the hospital system. And I think that very favorably influences when I design development programs, when I try to decide which programs to fund, when I try to decide, I have one product candidate in one of my companies that it works great, but there's no freaking way it would fit into how a hospital system works. Okay, it's combining radiation with a targeting antibody, but you'd have to basically make it in the nuclear medicine lab and get it into the patient in a matter of minutes. And that's just not practical. Unless we're going to put rocket-powered sort of roller skates on nurses and doctors, we can't do things that quickly. But I only know that because I've worked in that environment. So I actually love being able to draw upon what I know of being a practicing physician and using it as I now try to design and make new sort of weapons for the physicians who are still taking care of the patients.
That was great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Stephen, I know you've been involved with a number of different companies and different things. How did you find these opportunities? Or I know your passion drove you there, but there's still some business acumen that goes along with that as well. So how did these bubble up, or what made you go one direction and not another direction?
So, and someone else alluded to a question of, companies are born in different ways. As someone alluded to, sometimes there's, a scientist has a discovery, an application is filed for a patent, and then a company evolves out of that to develop the technology. I've also done it where I've just had, along with my peers, ideas, and we're like, okay, now we have to go out and find, is there technology existing that will enable it? Or do we have to literally start from scratch and invent a whole new field? Okay? And there's no one right way. I don't think there's a better way. if you need to be a member of a, say multi-100-person organization, then you might find it really lonely starting companies when it's you and maybe one or two other people. You better like those people and trust those people. Another thing I would say about the path I've taken, you have to be prepared to fail. And you can't view failure as you're a failure. Sometimes, your leads just don't pan out. Sometimes you do the experiments and the data shows, your great idea, maybe it wasn't as great, or maybe it is great, but you can't make what it is you need to make, or maybe you can't make it at a low enough cost to make it practical to actually turn into a commercial drug. That may be failure of the drug development process. You just have to realize you don't internalize it as your personal failure. One of the things I will say about like where I live, let's face it, there are wonderful entrepreneurial people in all sorts of areas of the United States and the world. But the Bay Area is a bit unique. And I would say that I know, let's say here, you get no kudos. You don't get invited to the party, if you will. You don't get invited if all you do is talk about all the things, all the ideas you've had, and you see other people's success. And if you say, "Oh, I thought of that. I could have done that." Okay, no one cares about that. Here, it's people who might say, "Yeah, I'm on my 5th startup. The first 4 I failed, but I'm still trying." You get invited to the party because you have that kind of no quit, won't accept failure, will continue to try to do what it is you think is worthwhile and important doing. And I just love that aspect of it. It's not about how much money you've made or how many drugs you've gotten approved. It's that you're trying, you're putting your effort behind the idea. And I think that's the biggest thing I look at, is differentiating people that are interested in entrepreneurism and people who are just innate entrepreneurs. I'm not so sure you can teach someone to have that just passion. I'm sure we've all either know people or have heard of people who say, well, let's take, for example, I know we had a couple, but I think Max, I'm looking at you here. You're getting a PhD as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So in my opinion, instead of Max saying, okay, I'm going to go to 4 years of medical school, instead it's like, okay, I'm going to spend 7 or 8 years getting the 2 degrees. Okay. Max, I'm hoping, really wants to get the science degree and really hone his craft as a scientist in addition to being a physician. So you had to make a decision, Max, okay, that your gut told you, I really want to do this. It's not the fastest route to becoming a faculty member or becoming, having a good job, but it's what you really wanted to do. So in some ways, I think you channeled an entrepreneurial spirit by saying, I'm going to do this extra thing. What do you guys feel, if anyone that is on this call, if anyone here feels like they really want to be an entrepreneur and they feel that they have entrepreneurial spirit, what's holding you back? What do you feel is holding you back? So let me tell you what I hear when I talk to other groups of students, either at the undergraduate level, the medical school level, whether it's at Northwestern or at other institutions. The most common thing that people ultimately will share, that what's holding them back, is that no one's grabbing them by the collar and saying, here, let me show you how to do it. Now, what I sometimes say is that if you need someone to grab you by the collar and show you what to do, show you how to be an entrepreneur, then maybe you're not cut out to be an entrepreneur. If you wake up and you think, like I did during medical school, I mean, I don't know what your schedule looks like now. When I went to medical school, if you just went straight through, so at the end of your 2nd year, you went right into clinical third-year rotations. You did them all back to back. You never took any vacation. You did all of your senior rotations. People were basically done with their requirements for graduation with maybe, 3-4 months to spare. And, they backpacked or they went to the beach or they kind of did something like that. What I did is I took time off in the middle of medical school and used all the sort of cobbled together all of that vacation time. And I went and I worked in a lab, raised some money, and started designing products. Because even though I was like, yeah, that's going to sort of mean, the end of medical school, I'm going to be working harder while my friends are off, playing, hooky. But see, it didn't matter. I really wanted to do it. So I found a way to make it happen. And I think that's what you have to ask yourselves is, what are you willing to sacrifice and how strong is that pull?
Could I ask a quick question, kind of going off exactly what you just discussed about
Sure.
like exploring within medical school? Like I guess in like my case, I am planning on doing a MBA in between the third and fourth year,
Okay.
and potentially like working in like industry or like business in the business world for like a year or two. And I just wanted to know your thoughts on like, I know it's not like insanely common, but I know there are other students who have done it through the Northwestern system. And I guess what your thoughts are on like doing that within medical school as opposed to before or after, if that makes sense.
I mean, I went to the business school at night while I was a student at the medical school by day. Never earned the degree because that would have meant I actually had to pay the money. Got the education, didn't have to pay for a degree. I think if you can say to people, this is what I really want to do, and I'm sure the school is supportive of that, I would say, do it. But please finish your medical education. Don't abandon it, because I think you'll ultimately come to where you would really regret that. And the better time to finish it is now than 20 years from now. But do it. And when you think about what kind of work experience to get, think very carefully about that. What are you really looking for? Are you looking for to work at a big company and get coached and counseled and sort of brought up? Or you might say, no, I'm going to go work at a company like Stephen has, and I'm going to be person number 4. And maybe I don't know how to do anything, but I'm going to learn real fast and I'm going to bust my butt and I'm going to do something. So it kind of becomes both are equally good. It's just what's appealing to you. I discourage you from ever thinking that there's really only one successful path or only one right way or only one, good part of the industry. It depends on what's going to be best for you and what's going to make you happiest. I genuinely believe happy people do better in school. They do better in their work. They enjoy their careers. I mean, I got a lot of questions about life-work balance, and I was going to kind of laugh and tell you that almost anyone who knows me might tell you that, let's say, work-life balance isn't my strong suit. It's not my strength, but I love what I do for work. So right now, like I don't need all sorts of hobbies because I love what I do for work. I love being immersed in science. I love trying to solve problems. I love meeting great, brilliant people that make me better than I am. I love working as part of a team. So that's another thing. If you enjoy what you do for work, it makes it easier to have, let's say, quality of life. What do you want to do during those years when you go work for a company? What do you think you want to do?
I guess personally, I'm open to anything. I studied econ in undergrad. So like I always had an interest in, I don't know, doing something at like the intersection of business and science. Like I worked at APV a couple of summers ago, but I really did not enjoy that just because there was like a big corporate matrix hierarchy structure where I didn't really feel like I had any autonomy. So I did not like that. But then like one job I really did enjoy looking back was when I was 18 working for like a San Fran startup selling Wi-Fi routers, which was like the most random thing I could have possibly done during the summer. But like I really enjoyed doing that because it was like the startup culture and like I had so much autonomy and like I set my own schedule, I set my own meetings. The boss like trusted me, like he was never like doubting what I was up to, if that makes sense. Whereas at AppV, they were like always like peeking in my cubicle to make sure I was on top of things, and just like kind of the two extremes, I guess, of like working in corporate versus working in a startup. So,
But they're equally good. Some people benefit from more structure.
Mhm.
Some people really can't deal with structure. Doesn't mean they wouldn't benefit from it. They just can't deal well with it. So yeah, I think you should look at all those things. I think you should also maybe look up and communicate with another distinguished alumni. His name's Chandler Robinson. And you should reach out to him. And he's had a sort of like me, diverse background and done all sorts of things. And currently the CEO of a Chicagoland area biotech company. But I think there's someone that you remind me of sort of his story. Other burning questions? Come on.
I'd like to follow up on some things you were talking about. Can you tell me more about like your role at the companies you're at right now and like what your like daily like life is like?
Okay. Right now, I could sum up my daily life as probably being Zoom, Teams, Skype, and Netflix. That probably summarizes my daily life. I have for the past, let me count, let's say for the past 13, 14 years, I found companies, I raised the money for the companies, I've done both private and public companies, and I'm always the chief executive officer of those companies. My daily routine right now, and let's face it, your daily routine isn't what it might have been if we hadn't had COVID. I am trying to do everything that I need to do, interacting just like we're interacting now, instead of face-to-face, which I like face-to-face. So instead of constantly flying back and forth from San Francisco to New York or Boston or Washington, just lots of Zoom calls. And I think I've learned, just like others have learned, and certainly students all over the world have learned, you can accomplish a lot more via video conference than I think we once believed. It's amazing how out of necessity we've had to adapt, and the quality of education and the quality of work like mine, it really hasn't suffered. What is it that you think I do that you're worried about? I'm going to ask you that question.
I don't know about like worried about, but I guess like coming from like a family like where it's more like I don't really know what people kind of do in biotech companies.
Okay.
Yeah, like I'm actually part of this biotechnology training program where we actually get to have an opportunity to do an internship during my graduate school. So
Okay.
I'm like looking at opportunities right now for this summer, but it's kind of, I think while I'm looking at all these different jobs, I think it's really interesting how many different roles there are in like a biotech company. So I was very curious on like what you do.
Well, so like for right now, with the company that is just weeks old, I do everything. And so you could argue I'm the CEO, the CFO, the C of everything. I'm also, I empty the wastebasket and I do all of it. And some people that would really bother them that they had to do everything. I don't mind, I guess. And then as I add people, I just love working with super passionate and talented people. It makes me happy. It makes me better. It makes me enjoy working with such really talented individuals. But I'm looking around my desk here, and I'd say I have stacks of papers and nature journals that I'm reading things, and documents that I'm writing, and contracts that I'm drafting, and patents that I'm reading. I tend to save those for nighttime because they help me go to sleep. But lots of things to do. And, for me, having that kind of varied day, and that I'm not just doing one thing, I can break it up into sort of immersing myself in science, medical science, hardcore business. It actually helps keep me, from ever getting bored.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a more practical question. So it sounds like when you were in medical school, you were involved in some of this discovery work, and this continued when you were a resident and onwards. Were there any technical skills that you developed undergrad or medical school that you thought really helped you in that work? And do you have any advice as to how to develop those skills, and maybe what you would recommend that we look into now as medical students?
So I can tell you that the technical skills that I had were zero. And that was one of the challenges, is when I went around speaking to faculty and saying, I have these ideas, I need, or I want someone to, give me a bench space, fund me, have people in your help teach me how to do what I need to do. And, I want to ask these questions, and I want to do experiments. The most common response was this belief that I was trying to get a tech job, to be a laboratory technologist. Well, first of all, I would have been a terrible laboratory technologist because I had no technical skill. They definitely didn't know what to do with someone who was in their very early 20s and saying, I actually want to do research. I want to do researchers in the area that I want to do it. So maybe I was a little bit, I was showing a little too much audacity, but ultimately, found someone who gave me space, made some introductions, which led to my getting a very large philanthropic grant to support my work. I had to teach myself the skills. Literally, I remember getting a book of techniques in immunology and going page by page and doing all of the very fundamental experiments to teach myself how to do them. And so that type of opportunity, the mentorship I had, that acquisition of skills, but also the satisfaction of knowing that it wasn't a program I was following. I had to get on the phone, I had to write letters, I had to get on the L and go visit people. I had to basically work my way into someone's lab, and they had to take a chance on me. And I took it very seriously, that the last thing I was going to do is ever have them regret taking a chance on me. I still now, 35 years later, still in touch with the PhD who ran the lab, who used to come in and drive me home because I would go after class in medical school and I'd still be in the lab working at midnight. And he was afraid something was going to happen to me. So, again, I think I proved to myself that I had the gumption to go after what I wanted, and I had to acquire the skills. I had none. So don't think that you have to show up and say, oh, look what I can do for you. I think what you're going to do for someone is you're going to impress upon them that you are committed to success, you're committed to doing quality work, you're committed to listening and learning, and your greatness is going to be a reflection of that person who takes a chance on you. And be prepared to work hard. Well, I'll just jump. Someone asked me about, I'm trying to think of the phrasing here. It had to do again with work-life balance. And they asked me what was my sort of non-negotiable part of my personal life. And I would say that All four of my kids probably wish I wasn't as readily involved in their life. My kids, my wife and I, we raised 4 kids and also raised a niece. So the age span is I have a 9-year-old, 14-year-old, 24-year-old, 28-year-old, and 30-year-old. So I've got a full spectrum. And they all, I'm always available for them. Single most important mammal in my life is my dog. And I don't say that to be funny. It is 100% true. And I will never choose work over going skiing with my wife.
Yeah, I guess while we're on the subject of like work-life balance stuff, I like, you know, when I was in undergrad, like especially senior year, when I was kind of taking like slightly like goofier classes, I would really enjoy, you know, like staying in lab until, you know, like midnight and stuff. You know, you'd like be there, you'd sneak out, get a workout in, you know, you'd come back and keep working. But in medical school, I just feel like the amount of time that I have to dedicate to learning things doesn't allow me to make the kinds of like basic science progress that I made during my gap year, you know, when I could just like go like 50 plus hours a week in the lab. Like, do you have anything to say about that, or whether like a clinical or translational research position might like help you make more impact with less time or something? I don't know.
Here's where, if my children were sitting in the room, they would say to you, don't listen to him. Don't listen to what he's going to tell you. So take what I'm going to say with a grain of salt. There are way more than 50 hours in a week. So, you know, I'll give you a small story or anecdote. I remember when I was a resident, the Washington University School of Medicine recruited a new cardiologist in. He had been the chief resident at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. And the way he tells the story is, you know, when he was recruited, he was guaranteed that he would have 50% of his time protected for research. And about 6 months into his job, he would always complain to the residents, and he was friendly with the residents. He would say, you know, shit, you know, I'm seeing patients, 10 hours a day. I have no time to do any research. So he went and he spoke to his boss. And his boss said, well, you know, let's assume you're working 12 hours a day. You still have the other half. So the point is that, you know, sometimes you have to work more hours than you might want to if you really have that burning desire to do medical school plus something else. Or you might have to say, well, I'm going to focus on medical school while I'm in class, and maybe the summer between first and second year is where you have to find a very fulfilling opportunity that you're going to really try to cram maybe 6 months worth of research into a 3-month period of time. If it starts going well, you might say, well, okay, I'm going to try to put in an hour or two each evening to continue that work, maybe on weekends. The point is, you find a way to stay involved if it becomes important to you, if it has meaning. So I would just encourage you to, look for an opportunity that is going to fit the amount of time you can commit to it, and just do the most with that time.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you so much.
Speaking of time, this hour has just flown by. I want to be respectful of Stephen's time and students. Any burning final questions?
I will tell you that when you participate in these programs, you've already selected yourself as students, as people that are willing to take the time out of your busy week to listen to someone like me. Well, as you listen to other alumni physicians of Feinberg give their talks, that's another great opportunity. If you hear someone speak and you're like, wow, I want mentoring from that person. I want to ask more questions. I want to see if I can go work with that person. Okay? That's again one of those tests of maybe your entrepreneurial spirit. Can you follow up with them? In my day, again, it was a phone call or I had to write a letter. Let's face it, email makes these things a lot easier. But I really do encourage you to, if something catches your attention or a person really catches your attention, go to them. I think you will find the alumni base of the school is more than enthusiastic to help you personally or to steer you to another alumni to help you find someone that's going to meet your needs. Okay, we are there. We're not, we're not going to come to you to say, oh, Alec, what can I do for you today? Or, Alicia, how are things going? Okay. But, if I've said something, for example, that you're like, wow, I want to talk to Steven some more, then reach out to me. That'd be part of my day. It'd be my pleasure to help anyone and everyone, if that's what is going to be good for you. That's one of the unified factors of everyone that participates in this program. We love what we do. We appreciate that Northwestern is responsible for getting us started in doing what we're doing, and we all want to give back.
I'm so glad you said that, and it's a great point. And it's not just a reflection of how generous the alumni are, but it's really a reflection of you guys and how special you are as students. These alumni care about you. And, having done nearly 100 of these, I have never once had a doctor say, no. Now, sometimes the schedule has not allowed them to do it when I ask, and maybe we do it next year. But every single time the answer is yes, because they care about you guys.
There are universities that, let's say, tout their alumni, there's a lot of braggadociousness. I think Northwestern doesn't behave in that way, and I'm glad. But when I think about prominent alumni of Northwestern, either undergraduate, any of the graduate schools, certainly the medical school, there are phenomenally impressive people that have done amazing things and made great contributions to the world. They're happy. And again, it all started in the snow of Chicago. So I think the expectation by the alumni, just like your faculty and your deans, the expectation is that you're all going to be superstars. And remember, superstar can be anything from taking care of patients, teaching, doing research, doing a mixture of all, working in industry, being a lawyer, whatever. But that 4-year education you're getting at the medical school will underpin whatever you do in the future. And you're going to look back and you're going to be really glad that you went to the Feinberg School and that you became MDs. I think it's an amazing degree. I wish I could only get one of my kids to actually want to become a doctor, but I think being an MD is so powerful. Look at me. You can do different careers during your life because that MD translates into so many things. So I just hope that you, sort of thrive during whatever restrictions you have related to COVID-19, and even take that. Being a medical student during this pandemic, what an opportunity from the standpoint of therapeutics, looking to see where the gaps were in preparedness for this pandemic. It could even be from, there have been discussion about, well, instead of having to distribute vaccines, could it be something where you sell what almost looks like a printer cartridge that has the material in it, and you can print vaccines on paper that has little spikes, and all you have to do is put it on your arm and swat it. People are thinking of all sorts of things of how can we be prepared better for the next pandemic. So I hope you're at least a little bit inspired to go along with what I'm sure is some frustration, but get inspired by this. Say, what can I do that's going to, how is this speaking to me to think about something differently? And I think you will, when you're my point in your life, you'll look back and you will remember you were a medical student during the COVID-19 pandemic. And, at least one of you is going to actually do something related to infectious disease because of it. And I think that's a great catalyst.
Fantastic.
And on that note, I think there are students interested in potentially reaching out. Like, what would be the best way to contact you?
Email srdeitcher@gmail.com. And Dan and Larry can provide that to you, and write to me, and I will definitely write back to you, and I'll do whatever I can to help. And it's not that I'm only going to help one of you or up to 3 of you. Said I'll help any of you. It is important. Remember, people like me are going to need better healthcare to help us fight illnesses as we get older. And I'm hoping that you guys are the ones that are going to either take care of me or find the better therapy. So, there's a selfish reason to invest in your futures.
Thank you so much for offering. And guys, I will share Stephen's email with you tomorrow, as well as the recording, in case you want to revisit any parts. And
enjoy yourselves, do well. You're very fortunate, and I hope you feel that way, and just be happy. And I can't emphasize that enough. Enjoy what you're doing, and then it doesn't feel like school or work.
perfect way to close. Stephen,
Well,
student friend.
Thank you to all of you for giving me this opportunity. I'm, again, I always feel great after doing this, and I'm sure I'm going to have a great additional 4 or 5 hours of work today. So be well, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Have a great night, everyone.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Stephen.